I was 11 when a man in a perfect suit told me to move to coach, even though my ticket said 2A. The kind of smile on his face that says he knows the order of things, and you must be confused, right? The cabin went quiet in that heavy way strangers get quiet when they smell conflict but want a show. 3 hours later, our plane was circling back, and federal agents were waiting on the jet bridge for me. Yeah, that happened. I remember holding my boarding pass like a tiny flag I had to plant and defend, hands steady. Voice not so much the flight attendant, drifting over with that soft tone adults save for kids when they've already decided the ending. "Honey, first class is up here, economy is back there," she said, her hand already turning my shoulder toward the curtain, and I lifted the pass so close she had to see it. 2A window first. While the man finally closed his laptop and looked at me the way people look at a smudge on glass. "There must be some mistake," he sighed. Not angry, just inconvenienced. Then he eyed the metal loyalty card in my palm and said it couldn't possibly be mine. Not at my age, not with my face, you know what I mean. My dad, Marcus, stood from 3 rows back in economy. His rule is some days you sit in front because you earned it. Some days you sit in back so you remember why you're working. And he didn't raise his voice, didn't posture, just asked the attendant to scan the manifest. The scanner chirped that happy little beep that means someone is exactly where they're supposed to be. And the air shifted. The pearls clutched the bystander with the phone pretended not to record. And the man in the suit, Bennett Cole, searched the cabin for backup and found the kind of nods people give when they agree with the old map of the world. Then the woman across the aisle, hair like silver water eyes that notice, slid him her seat to defuse the bomb, and for a minute it felt like dignity could be returned with a simple swap. Takeoff smoothed into that soft engine hum that lets me crawl into code and forget the room, bright path glowing on my screen like a small sunrise. I'd built it in our basement because my mom used to come home from her classroom with stories about brilliant kids mislabeled as lazy or difficult. So BrightPath doesn't just grade answers, it reads how a brain moves. Letter reversals that aren't carelessness attention, that surges like waves, sensory load, that drowns out meaning. And it dances with that pattern instead of fighting it. I was tweaking a parameter from that morning's update, shaving false positives, because every point we reduce is a kid who doesn't get misdiagnosed, when I felt Bennett watching me, not curious like a student, curious like a guard. And I kept my eyes on the screen, because if you make the work undeniable, sometimes the noise lets go. He got up, disappeared toward the galley phone pressed tight to his ear, and 5 minutes later, the captain came on with that careful voice that tries to sound both neighborly and legal. Due to a security situation, we're returning to Denver. And the cabin turned toward me in one slow motion, not at my code, not at my ticket, at me, and it burned, it really did. The jet bridge felt colder than the outside air. Agent Priya Shah said my full name like it belonged to me. And not a file led us to a conference room that smelled like old coffee and budget cuts, and slid a folder across the table. An anonymous tip about financial irregularities, international accounts, possible laundering, connected to BrightPath. The kind of accusation that doesn't have to be true to do damage. Our attorney Valerie Chen came in with boots that said she does not do pretend. Our COO Luis Mendoza brought hard drives like armfuls of receipts, and we walked the agents through every dollar. Triple verification on international disbursements, 3 physical keys in 3 distant places, documentation tied to real classrooms in Ohio and rural Georgia, and a school in Dar es Salaam, where kids cheer at screens the way other kids cheer at touchdowns. I pulled up a clip from last week's teacher training in Nairobi, because faces cut through fog, and I watched Agent Shah's eyes soften when a boy on the video read a full paragraph for the first time without giving up halfway. Then the door opened, and the woman who had given up her seat stepped in, placed a drive on the table like a clean blade, introduced herself as Evelyn Rhodes, former senior VP at Helios Capital, and told the room I wasn't under investigation, I was under attack. Project Eclipse, that was the label on the folder. A playbook wrapped in pretty language phrases like market integrity, hiding tactics that smelled like pressure, smear, exhaust. Do it again until they sell or break. There were emails about narrative risk slides, about neutralizing founders with disproportionate sympathy, lists of targets that looked a lot like companies led by women and people of color, and right there, Bright Path circled like an errand. Agent O'Leary read without breathing. Agent Shaw kept that professional face, but the muscle near her jaw ticked, and by early evening we were cleared, no charges, no perp walk, just a statement from Valerie that we operate with full transparency and will continue to do so, then the cameras outside asking questions we wouldn't answer, while a few people in the crowd clapped like they had their own bruises. In the corner I saw Bennett again, small in the noise, and later that night he showed up at our hotel room with a folder he could barely hold, and a voice with all the bravado wrung out of it. Admitted he made the call from the plane, said he'd been told to trigger Protocol 7, showed us performance reviews, tagged for compatibility, risk, next to names that looked like mine, showed us recordings from meetings where my face was a slide under the words narrative threat. He talked about his nephew Caleb, 9 years old, dyslexic, how the kid tried Brightpath at a friend's house and read a chapter out loud for the first time, how he almost helped kill the thing that could help his own family because he couldn't stand a child in first class, and he didn't cry, but his voice did, you know what I mean? My dad didn't flare, he let silence do the work, and I told Bennett the truth, I tell myself. Awareness is a first step, but it's just a step. What are you going to do with what you know? And he handed over passwords and drives and said he'd testify, even if it cost him everything. And Valerie nodded, like good, now we can begin. We still had our investor meeting the next morning. 45th floor glass so clean, the skyline looked like a layout. Partners with guarded faces, because money hates risk, until risk becomes story. And we didn't lead with what happened on the plane, we led with the work. I showed Brightpath learning with the student, instead of against them. The way text stabilizes for a dyslexic reader, when motion is tuned just right, the micro-challenges that catch attention before it slides off the page for a kid with ADHD, the sensory sliders that let a student on the spectrum lower the volume on the world so meaning can get in. Then I put up the forensics and let the evidence be polite and devastating. At the same time, intrusion attempts from shell companies that didn't exist last quarter. Ghost transactions trying to pin our Tanzania fund to a Cayman address. Everyone caught mid-insertion by our triple verification, like a counterfeit bill getting grabbed at the window. Evelyn laid out the rest. The emails, the calls, the way power wears a suit, and acts shocked when you measure it. And the room changed temperature, you could feel it. And Pioneer Ridge said, yes, 80 million to scale, plus a defense fund for founders who get targeted the way we did, plus calls to the right agencies so the right kind of investigation would have a name by nightfall. There wasn't a tidy movie ending. There were depositions and hearings and headlines that bent toward the truth. Slowly, there was Bennett telling a grand jury what he did and why there was Evelyn losing friends with famous last names, because conscience will cost you something. There was Agent Shaw texting me a photo of her daughter, reading under a blanket with a flashlight, the best kind of receipt. Months later, I ran into the flight attendant, Tina, at the airport, where we'd just opened a Brightpath learning hub so kids could kill layovers with curiosity instead of candy. And she said she was sorry. Without a script, said she saw what she was used to seeing that day, and not what was in front of her. And I said thank you, because sorry is a verb if you let it be. I still fly some trips, I'm in the back by choice. Some trips I'm up front, because sleep is an investment. Every trip I press my forehead to the window, And remember that seats are temporary and character is carry-on. It goes where you go, no gate check. We didn't win because we shouted, we won because we showed the work again and again until the lie ran out of oxygen. Because a woman who helped build the machine climbed inside and pulled wires with her bare hands. Because a man who liked the machine's perks more than its purpose finally listened to a child read. Because a kid with a ticket refused to stand through takeoff. You don't need permission to fly. But once you're flying, pull somebody up with you. If this hit a bruise you've been carrying, tell me below. Was the airline right to ground the flight? Or was that prejudice with a badge? Does a man like Bennett earn forgiveness if he spends the rest of his career fixing what he helped break? What does justice look like when the problem is bigger than one seat? Drop your city and your time, share your story, argue with me, and if you want more true stories told without the costume, like and subscribe. I'll be in the comments tonight.